So, with the ending of Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, the series has made valiant attempts to repair some of the huge issues created by Season 1. While not a perfect fit, and the overall look of the show has to be excused as a visual reboot, it is important to acknowledge that these are retcons, created from the balance of writing a new tale and adhering to the larger universe's established continuity, both of which are important to a Star Trek tale, and as such, personally, I'd rather see the addition of retroactive continuity that adds to the canon than ignoring it all. So, I'm Rick, and today we're looking at the status of the Star Trek universe post Season 2 of Discovery, where this may lead looking forwards, and how things were folded into the plot to reduce the impact of a prequel. Obviously, this will be rife with spoilers for Discovery, so if you wish for a blind experience, I direct you to the escape pod that looks like a back button. The USS Discovery and the USS Enterprise had a climactic battle with Control and its drone fleet before the USS Discovery jumped into the future, but these events were recounted differently during the Starfleet debrief at the end of the show. Pike, Spock, Tyler and the rest of the crew go about reciting a fabricated version of events to Command in order to force Starfleet and the Federation into adopting a number of new policies. The debrief reveals that Section 31 as an organisation is not gone, but is now leaderless, and Starfleet is seriously concerned with its operations. Ash Tyler is promoted to the commander of Section 31 for his perspective on the moral line that Starfleet's Black Ops walk. They first go about suggesting that Section 31 needs greater oversight and transparency from Starfleet moving forwards, and it still possesses around 170 ships based on Georgiou's estimates. As Section 31 is anything but under Starfleet oversight by the time of the Dominion War, we can assume that things do not go well for the organisation. Tyler accepts the role as head of 31 to prevent the possibility of a Control-like AI from occurring again, and from what we've seen of his character, his motivations likely remain noble. But nonetheless, Section 31 is fated to effectively go rogue, or be buried so far within the Federation records that no one can identify it or who's in charge. So either Tyler undergoes a darker personality turn at some point, or his reforms fail to take root, or something else entirely, but this downfall is likely to be the subject of the Section 31 show, a statement backed up by Kurtzman's words in a recent Hollywood Reporter interview. The only thing that remains unresolved is that the Section 31 show is set to have Michelle Yeoh returning as Mirror Captain Georgiou, and last we saw of her, she was on board the Discovery, travelling with them into the future. So either the show is set well beyond Tyler's time, or she jumps ship before the USS Discovery vanished, or finds her way back to the 23rd century. Captain Pike and everyone else assert that the Discovery has been destroyed by the attack of Control, and that it vanished in a Spore Drive related explosion. So why lie? Well, this could serve a couple of purposes. First off, it paints the attack from Control to be even worse than originally thought, as despite the loss of 30 Section 31 ships, few lives were actually lost in the battle. Now, according to the Enterprise's testimonies, alongside the deaths on Section 31's base, they have to add the 130 odd souls of a starship, even more reason not to recreate a system of influence based on an AI. The research that carried on in creating true AIs seems to have been curtailed, but not halted, with creations such as Daystrom's M5 proving that even light AIs need to be carefully approached. By the time of TNG, some 100 plus years later, full AI is still a rarity, with Dr. Soong being one of the foremost pioneers of the field alongside Louis Zimmerman, and the Federation treats the issues of artificial sentience very seriously moving forwards. Secondly, lying about the Discovery's destruction covers up the use of time travel and the fact that they were able to fabricate a second Red Angel suit, a technology previously thought lost to a Klingon raid. Spock in particular is strongly tied to time travel, both in Discovery's portrayal and later in his timeline, so understands the importance of the Temporal Prime Directive, Much like the allure of the mirror universe, the notion of time travel is ripe for abuse, unintended or not. By covering up the existence and successful use of a time travel suit, Starfleet continues on its approach towards a passive observer's take on history, and give it 9 years, they're taking entire starships back in time to conduct research as seen in Operation Earth, though this is accomplished with a differing method than the suit. As for the technology involved in the Red Angel suit, well, it only kind of worked. Dr. Gabriel Burnham stranded herself in the future and still hasn't figured out a way to return to her own time, despite years of trying. Considering she was trying to go backwards in time by half an hour, that is a major issue. As for the Federation's approach to time travel, they seem to have solved these problems over the next 9 years. Again, see Operation Earth. As for time crystals, they're supposedly not natural to our dimension, and no known race has manufactured them. The only natural deposit of them can be found on Boreth, the Klingon monastery where Kahless is prophesied to return one day. Arguably, the addition of a cave of time-altering artifacts could put a science fiction spin on the notion that an ancient Klingon warrior demigod could indeed return in some fashion someday. Anyway, the importance of this location to the Klingons is deeply tied to their spirituality, and pilgrims who meditate in the Temple of Boreth often undergo visions, so perhaps the crystal's influence isn't all that far-fetched, even if it's kept secret. After all, Section 31 proved that if people were aware of the time crystals, they most definitely would steal them. As for the name, I don't like it, but it is what the real life, but theoretical higher dimensional structures are called. So there's that. Just a quick aside about secrets. I can't really blame the crew of the USS Enterprise for covering up things either, although effectively lying about things and facing disciplinary actions if found out. Look at the enemy they just faced. A rogue Starfleet AI created by the Federation's lax attitude and misplaced faith in a hands-off approach. I can see the logical conclusion that they could present a view of events to help prevent a similar situation from evolving again. Let's talk about the Spore Drive. Obviously, the device is a recent addition to canon, therefore was never in previous series, but that won't do for an in-universe explanation. So let's look at Trek's history of dealing with similar tech and how it was left during debrief at the end of Season 2. Well, a side effect of the crew saying that the Discovery exploded in a Spore Drive related explosion, hey, would that be called a mushroom cloud? Could have applied unintended pressure to Starfleet to drop Spore research. Originally, I was looking for a single event that would make Starfleet weigh the gain of instantaneous travel against the cost and say that it's not worth it, but that never really happened. The end result of abandoning the Spore jumps may be a coalition of all of its problems. First off, the USS Glenn and the Discovery were the only two crossfield ships, and they had to be designed ground up to accommodate the drive. It's likely that the only way this was approved in its entirety was that the Crossfield class could accommodate a ludicrous amount of other research and development projects. Dr. Paul Stamets and Strahl were the two leads in the field of the mycelial network, and each was assigned to a ship. It proved to be highly dangerous to navigate the network without an organic pilot wired into the system, and this led to the deaths of all aboard the USS Glenn, minus one dead researcher. Then Paul Stamets had to genetically modify himself to function as a new pilot for the system, a blatant breach of the Federation genetics policy laid down in the face of the eugenics wars. On top of this, the drive caused problems with travel to the alternate dimensions, which made Stamets into a vegetable, and then they screwed up the return to their own universe by jumping forwards 9 months. After these issues, Starfleet puts the project on hold, but none of these issues really outweigh the potential gain of immediate travel across the galaxy. It needed further work, to be sure, but nothing yet convinces me that the Federation would drop it entirely. Then Season 2 happens. We learn the Jusep are a sentient race that inhabits the mycelial plane, and prolonged use of the drive may be detrimental to them. Certainly using it as a power source is. So another moral issue atop the pile there. Finally, the crew of the Enterprise come back and tell Starfleet Command that the USS Discovery, including Lieutenant Commander Stamets, have all died in a Spore Drive related explosion. Another seeming failure of the Spore Drive, and now the loss of the only remaining astromycologist and ship burst in the specifics of the Spore Drive. Sure, Starfleet still has the specs for the device, but looking at all the cons, on paper, makes it far less appealing. Starfleet has experimented with faster than warp tech before, or will do again, I mean. The USS Excelsior was the pioneer for the transwarp drive, but that research ultimately went nowhere, although perhaps it did eventually as they revamped the warp scale for TNG, but it took a while. While the USS Voyager brought home research on quantum slipspace tech, and after a semi-successful test flight, they still scrapped it because it was too risky. My point is, both transwarp and slipstream faced a single setback, and the projects were derailed for years. The Spore Drive faced numerous, and all the researchers involved appear to be dead. Finally, the classification of the USS Discovery from public records was done to cover up most of its events. From now on, when spoken of, it becomes that shady research vessel that was destroyed in 2258 with no official records. Just a footnote in Starfleet's history during the much more chaotic time of the post-Klingon War. For this reason, Spock, Sarek and Amanda keep the mention of Burnham's existence to a personal matter. Not out of character for Spock anyway, to want to avoid talking about his personal life, but there's now the added catch of someone finding out of Burnham, following a series of threads and getting suspicious when they find no mention of the USS Discovery, or a pardoned Starfleet mutineer. Maybe this is all over-rationalisation from my own head canon. But to me, this makes sense, and ultimately, I want it to make sense. There are to be further Discovery stories in the IDW comic Aftermath, which is set in the year 2258 and follows the crew of the USS Enterprise and Spock's family, so perhaps this will shed some more light on the post-Discovery timeline. As for the Discovery series itself, Season 3 is speculated to be at least beginning in the 32nd century, where the USS Discovery ended up, and maybe even staying there. The furthest in the Star Trek timeline we've ever seen, but that's a long way away. So, that's how Star Trek Discovery went about trying to tie up loose ends. A lot of what I've stated is based on the summary of the show's actions and the conclusion presented in Season 2, and may be subject to change with later Trek projects, but for now, I'm glad there was an effort made to make for more of a coherent timeline of events. So thanks for watching. I've been Rick, and until next time, see you later, and goodbye.